All right, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time in the world you're watching this, good day. Uh, Doug and Fred back again. Remember last time we talked about how to build management networks. And the comical thing of that engagement was we had realized in discussing how to build a management network to remotely administer your data center that the state of play had not really been updated in like 15 to 18 years since like the last time some of us did it. And that was neat to see. And it's really, I've had a lot of conversations with clients about extending management network architectures over the last couple of weeks based on that webinar we did. And at the same time, Fred and I sat back and we started talking about how do we manage VMs, containers, infrastructure resources when we deploy them into a public cloud. And there's a pretty consistent set of answers. They give me an SSH key that I can use, and then I can use their shell and manage the infrastructure. And we started saying, why can't we do the same in network infrastructure and on-premises environments? Why is the state of the art TACACs are like 15 levels, and that I have a completely decoupled user database where I forget to remove the user and then they can logic bomb or trash my network 2 weeks later? And we realized that there's a lot of room for improvement here. And so we were talking about applying cloud principles to networks, novel concept for Arista. And what we realized out of that was there's another opportunity. There's a way we could apply the cloud principles of system access and bring those from the way we do it in the cloud down to the enterprise. It might be another step in transforming our enterprise architectures to being more cloud-like, but also simplifying operations, reducing risk, improving agility, frankly, just making our lives a lot easier. So Fred, why don't you talk a little bit about what you came up with and how you see this working?
Yeah, I think after we started digging into this, I started looking at some of the ways that we can manage this stuff. And again, like you said, I looked at the cloud as a place for inspiration. And I came up with this kind of interesting tool that we have within EOS that I wasn't even aware of before, where we can use certificate-based SSH authentication as opposed to what most of us are used to, which is username and password, or if you're being a little bit better about it, a plain old SSH key that you store on your laptop and use that to SSH in. But certificates give you this whole other level of flexibility and control when it comes to being able to set TTLs on them or revoke them or manage them. I don't have to drop this SSH key into a million different devices with the potential of key sprawl all over the place. So it becomes much more manageable and actually much more flexible. You can define these service principles. So I can define different levels of access for different things. Am I allowed to go in as root? Am I allowed to go in as Fred? What can I do as a user? But this is all defined from the kind of security admin perspective.
But I don't need to now have a Evernote file with hundreds of X509 certificates slapped in it that I remember which one to pull and use, do I?
No,
That
no.
seems really obtuse.
Yeah, so the beauty is that I have something like a certificate authority. In this case, we're going to use HashiCorp's Vault tool, which is an amazing, really cool security secrets engine.
I've seen you use this in almost every demo we've done together, Fred. You're checking out an SSH key from Vault because your credentials expired right as we're about to do the demo.
Right, definitely.
Seems to be par for the course for us, right?
But it's showing that things are actually secure. But yeah,
and that it's not a fake demo.
And that it's not a fake demo. So we're going to use Vault here as a secrets engine, and it's a very well-known, very well-established secrets engine. I can use that also to serve as my certificate authority, so it can sign my public certs. And then I can then use that certificate to log into all my devices, and I only have to I can do the same config on every device now. So again, back to our first discussion about repeatability and making things very cookie cutter. I don't have to worry about having a user's end SSH key stuck into every single device that could change if they get a new laptop or something like that.
Well, this also means that I don't need to have the username, password, credentials stored, no matter how much we hash it and encrypt it, but stored in my CLI show config either. right? Like
Exactly.
I'm ripping that out and centralizing that into a central secret store that is designed to protect those privileged account credentials.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so yeah, I think it's actually a very elegant solution to being able to access my devices securely, being able to have control over that access from an administrator's point of view. You know, again, I can revoke these certs, I can time these out, I can say, you know, you got to get a new cert every 30 minutes just to keep things fresh. But yeah,
But wait, but I can do that without impacting the administrative or operator experience in an overtly negative way. It's not like I'm having, like, I hate when IT makes me change my password. Sorry, Eric, but I do, right? And this means that key rotation, that certificate rotation can happen automatically in the background without me being negatively impacted or feeling like I have to go back and do it again and again and again.
Right, right. If you wanted to set up a cron job or something that automatically did it for you, that's totally fine. But again, the IT side has the ability to kill it off if you were to leave the company or whatever, you needed a different level of access.
Sure.
They can make those modifications on the back end.
That makes perfect sense. But like, and so I heard you say like you found this in EOS. So like, is this in EOS or is this in like CentOS underneath in an RPM that you're calling?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised that it is in EOS. Like it's, you know, I started off like, oh, what do I got to do to hack up CentOS to make this work? And then, oh, lo and behold, the EOS engineers, as always, are ahead of me and have already implemented this as a full-blown EOS feature. So
We bow to the great Ken.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so walk me through it. Like,
Yeah.
what does
So
the setup look like? What are the components? How do you deploy it? How do we make this real?
yeah, so let me start sharing my screen. But yeah, it's pretty simple. So I'm SSH'd into to my Vault server. Now you would probably just run this off your laptop. You could run the Vault commands there, but I'm acting as an admin here as well as kind of end user because I'm going to set up the whole Vault SSH certificate system here. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on Vault, turn on its SSH certificate abilities, register my role. So we're going to say these are the types of users I'm going to have on the system. And then I'm going to configure EOS to then talk to Vault as the CA to be able to authenticate these users based on their certificates. So we'll kind of jump back and forth between what we're doing on the Vault server and what we're doing on the EOS device. So I have my crib sheet here because I don't trust myself with all these commands to do them properly.
You're not like me using, I used to use this program, Text Expander, where I could like Control-1, Control-2, Control-3, and it looked like I typed it out. It was so bad.
I'm not going to put up any pretenses
Such a marketing move, right?
And by the way, I've posted all this to the Arista Net DevOps GitHub site. So if you want to grab these commands, I've stuck them all up there so you can follow along at home if you want to. So the first thing I did is enable, so Vault has multiple secrets engines it can run, right? So you can have different types of secrets floating around. So I've enabled the SSH secrets engine, which is going to allow us to run this tool. And the way Vault works is it assigns these things different paths. So I've said, okay, we're going to assign this path SSH client signer. That's just what I decided to name this thing. And
it seems to be a reasonable name, though. I think
hey,
it's intuitive, and I can understand what you're after here.
Exactly. Yeah. Something that later on when I come back and look at this, I'm like, what exactly was that thing that I turned on?
Might not actually need a comment this one time to know what it is. Okay.
Right. Good variable naming. And then, so the second thing I've done here is I said, okay, we want to turn this into a CA. So that's what we're setting that to be signing key is true, right? So it's able to sign keys. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into my switch, and we're going to grab the root certificate from the CA, if I can copy and paste properly, into the switch. And so here I'm still using kind of the old school method of just logging with a username and password. This is what we want to avoid once we move into this thing. And so what this is doing is Vault actually sets up a public API server for everything that it's got. And so we can just do simply copy from that URL, which is my Vault public key, and stick it into Arista. EOS has a specific spot for your SSH CA keys.
So
right?
when you put that command in, let me just be very clear, you're going to your Vault server's IP address on port 8200 on that path, and it's downloading that SSH RSA public key that was generated above. So you're not sitting there and retyping it or cutting, pasting it or anything like that. It's securely downloading that.
That's exactly
and
right.
putting it into the right memory place in EOS.
Exactly. And the beauty of, I mean, this is so totally automatable, right? So I could throw this into my
Oh,
Ansible
yeah.
playbook. I could throw this into whatever so that I don't have to do a bunch of weird, and obviously you don't want to copy and paste this into, you know, some file sitting around somewhere. It's much nicer to make this just to be an API call. So here's this cool feature that I've discovered myself. I'm sure there's others out there who already knew about this one, but so I'm going to go to the SSH config of EOS, and now I can say, you know, this is the public key of our trusted CA, in this case, the Vault server that we just downloaded, right?
Because
So,
you named your public key demo.pem.
right, exactly. So I stuck it in the SSH key memory location, and I named it demo.pem, right?
And so now you say, trust the CA key, the public key, the pointer demo.pem. It gets that securely out of the file system.
Yep.
And has the certificate available to SSH.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so now I'm going to set up my user to now use the SSH principles, and I can specify these are parameters that you'll see later when we're starting to configure the keys in Vault, where I can define different user types, right? I can say whether you're a root user, whether you're an admin, whether, you know, it's totally flexible. You can put in whatever you want here, but it lets me assign multiple different tags to my different users that can then be used for providing access to my devices, right? So I'm saying my user is using this as their authentication method, and these are the service principles that I'm allowed to be a part of.
Okay, so these are SPNs. There's a service principal name of netadmin and a UPN of Fred L. Shoe.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So that'll map back to some of the cert credentials that we'll end up with.
I'm glad I paid attention to my Kerberos class once, man. It's all coming back to me now.
So now I'm going to set up Vault to say, okay, we're going to allow users to generate certificates for the role that we're just going to call my role here. And we're going to say that those certificates are going to expire after 3 minutes, right? So if I don't finish this demo in 3 minutes, I'm going to have to request another certificate.
Are you sure you don't want to put a 0 in there, Fred? I know how long I like to talk.
I could, but I kind of wanted to show that it will expire.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know.
Okay.
We could go multiple ways with
this.
No,
Let's do 3 and see what happens.
Let's have fun with it. All right.
All right.
So we've just said we've created a new signing role.
Fred, I don't usually think of credential expiration as fun, but I'm glad we can find fun during this situation in our lives. With my fun for the day was my peak credential expiration happened during my demo. Usually you and I cringe when this happens, but today it's a peak, not a valley.
Right. Today is what we're going for. So, all right. So now what I'm doing is now I'm gonna kind of change hats here, right? So now I'm the user, and I need to get a new cert. I need to get my public keys signed by the CA so that I can log into the device, right? So this is what the end user would do on their laptop. I'm going to say I'm going to use that SSH client signer that I set up earlier in Vault. I am going to request that I be part of these principles, my name and that net admin thing that we configured in EOS, right? So
by the way, is there a finite limit on the number of principles that I can assign to an entity that you're aware of at this point?
Not that I'm aware of. There probably is some limit, but it's not one that I've bumped into.
Okay.
And so we're gonna send the CA my public key because we want to get my public key signed by the CA, and then I'm gonna store what it gives me back into my SSH directory. So that's kind of, we're redirecting the output of that into id rsa-cert.pub. Okay, so that's what happened here. Now, when we do that, I'm going to have to change actually we can do this. And so what this is going to do, this is just an SSH command line tool that lets you see the details of the certificate that you got back. So here's all the details. I got the service principles that I asked for. This is when it's valid. You can see it's only valid for 3 minutes here.
This is your validation step. This is it took the commands that I gave it and everything's working. I've got a key. I've got my certs. We're good.
Yeah, I mean, normally you probably don't need to do this, but for illustrative purposes, just to show you that we got what we asked for.
I don't know, man. It's a feel good. It's like showing, show LLDP neighbor detail and know that I wired it up right. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and then typically you want to only enable you don't want to enable really any access to this except for read to the public key, so that you don't have people mucking around with it.
Yeah, probably don't want that overwritten, do you?
Yeah. And so now when I try to SSH, I'm going to SSH back into that same switch with the -I parameter of SSH. And this is the same way, again, to your point earlier, this is the same way you do it when you're trying to access your EC2 VM on AWS or your Azure VM on Azure. You're going to provide
What does -I do?
It tells it to look for your identity somewhere other than just asking you for a username and password.
Okay, so use a central identity server or service.
Right, and so I'm passing it my public key to say that we're going to use that to authenticate against, or to use to authenticate myself with the switch. And you can see, boom, it let me in. It never asked me for a username and password. I got authenticated directly through my key, right, or my cert, I should say. Now, one kind of extra little bit of fun we can have with this is we do have this ability on EOS to say, I'm going to say username secret star. What this means is I am no longer allowed to log into this device using my username password, right? So that old way of logging into this device is no longer valid. I can only log in using this certificate. So
is that on a per user basis that can be applied?
It is on a per user basis. So you can, you would set this, but you could set this kind of, again, the nice thing is this is a cookie cutter. I could do this in my automation script and not have to worry about various permutations of what this looks like. It's the same command everywhere.
Got it.
Kind of thing, right?
And so Fred, is it fair to say that like with this capability, what it lets us do is create like that break glass network concept where we're going to design our authentication and authorization model so that it cannot be defeated by a keylogger.
Right.
We will use certificates by default. Only in a like break glass situation, the CA's down, the CA's disconnected, we could have some small number of local accounts that maybe the CISO and the InfoSec team open. I check out the credential literally manually from the vault by them. I use that credential to restore service, and then that credential is destroyed and invalidated, and a new one-time account is created to replace it.
Exactly.
But our default becomes using the certificated identities that have timers and age out, and we remove risk from our configurations. We remove risk of keylogger intercept and man-in-the-middle attacks and so on, replay attacks, from affecting our ability to administer our own critical infrastructure.
Yeah, and you actually touched on another interesting point here. I'm only showing one side of this where I'm authenticating with the host, right? You can also turn on the reverse where we're going to make sure that the host is authenticated with me. So we can validate that there's no man in the middle, that I'm not accidentally SSHing into some other device, because I will request a certificate back from the host. But that's a little bit past where we wanted to go here. So
yeah, and we said we're going to keep it at 15 minutes. We're probably already punching 30.
Right.
So I get you. Oh yeah. Wait, your socket closed.
Well, so what I'm showing you here is I'm illustrating. I exited out. That 3-minute timer expired, so we managed to squeeze in that first SSH into the switch within the 3-minute window.
Got it in there.
But now that the 3-minute my certificate expired, it pops me back and it's trying to get me to do a password. If I type in my regular password, and you'll just have to take my word for it that I'm typing in the password that I'm supposed to use, it's denying me, right? So because my cert expired,
password 123 is very secure.
Are you watching my fingers type?
Echo.
But yeah, so the certificate expired on me. So now I'm actually no longer able to access the switch. So again, if you set these, you'd obviously not set them to 3 minutes, but you could set them to a reasonable amount such that if someone were to leave the company, someone were to walk away, they have all of their SSH keys stored on their laptop, but they're still no longer allowed to get there because
it could also be the length of an extended work shift, right? Like when I log in at the first thing I do in the morning is I check out today's credential.
Yeah.
And I use a 12-hour credential.
Yeah.
And then I'm most likely not going to get another during my workday.
Right. Yeah, I think that's totally legit. And here what I can do is if I did need to get back in, I got to remove the cert, but I can basically grab another key, right?
So refresh your key and then re-log in.
Right. So that becomes my kind of workflow. If I need to grab a key again, I'll just wipe out the old one and then grab a new one.
And we could probably even create a set of aliases that simplify some of this workflow as well.
Right. I'm working on my password. But yeah, you could easily set up a cron job or something.
PASSWO. Oh, sorry.
But yeah, you could easily set up a cron job or something that will just keep refreshing it for you up until you don't need it anymore.
Uh-oh, Fred, 3 incorrect password attempts.
I know. I'm gonna lock myself out of my own system. I'm gonna stop there before I really hose myself up.
Here goes the demo. Ladies and gentlemen, pay attention. It's about to go nuclear.
Yeah.
No, yeah, definitely pause before you get the hard lock, which is another good information security practice that we should all adhere to. As much as sometimes it's painful, these are good things to have. So Fred, this is super cool. Now I'm going to come back to one thing. Can you flip back to your VS Code screen for me?
Yeah.
First off, I love that you actually use VS Code to take notes. That's super cool. I need to do that more myself. But I notice you have like Slack command stuff going over there. We haven't talked about it, but could you give a little teaser? What might we do in the next session where we introduce some more cool stuff? What would be the next thing we could home in on?
Yeah, sure. So I'm playing around with some stuff where I'm creating some Slack CLI commands so that we could pipe data into Slack from, say, EOS or CloudVision. So imagine that we have our ops Slack channel, and I want to grab a show tech from a switch, and I want to paste that into my ops channel. That's totally doable, and I want to keep it composable, right? So I want to be able to run a command on my command line that will grab show tech, store that somewhere, and then just be able to pipe that over to a Slack command that'll punch it into my Slack channel for me. So that's a little side project I've got going on here that you're seeing the editor windows open for.
And that reminds me of one I saw that a client implemented, and it was an integration between the open source project Netbox, maintained by Jeremy Stretch, which is super cool, and Arista CloudVision and Slack. And the idea was a first level network operator field tech without having to have, you know, multiple levels of network access or configuration history and, you know, and trust behind them, could look up on a switch port on the wall jack. They could look up what the status of it, turn the port up and down, and change the VLAN assignment within an authorized namespace range. And so Slack gave me my single sign-on, Slack gave me my multi-factor authentication, and Slack constrained the command set that could be executed to just those functions. Yet now the remote field tech in an office, a branch, a stadium, whatever, is able to say, what's the status of Jack 5-52, turn the port up, plug a test kit in, make sure it works, set the appropriate, you know, network segmentation, validate it has reachability, and drive on without having to log into a network, check a certificate out, and do a lot of the activities we just showed, right? So the idea was, I hate to say this, but how do we dumb down or simplify some of the onerous, field-intensive network tasks so they can be approachable by a broader audience to enable my workforce to be more efficient?
Yeah, and that's super awesome. That's such a cool use case. And it also just gives you inherent logging of what happened, right? Because everything happened on the channel, so you know exactly what steps were taken when.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the topics we're going to continue to explore every couple weeks with the ample free time we have now to sit at home and whip these up. So Fred, as always, super cool. I hope you can recover your password. I don't know what you did there. I jest.
I'm going to do it right now.
Okay. Prove it works.
There.
Hey, he remembers his password. That's what IT gets for changing it on you every 2 months.
I just wanted to wait enough time so that, you know, it didn't think that I was trying to brute force my password. So
well played, my friend. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to also in the next couple days be chatting about the impact of containerized infrastructures and architectures on networks and what we need to do to not lose control of our network in a cloud native environment. And if you saw this and thought it was super cool, a brief callback, we had a really nice conversation about building remote management access and networks that are designed to be resilient during BCP scenarios so that we can get to them and manage them even if we have to be remote. We had a really good session, very interactive, on network operations maturity and how we see companies strategically embracing automation and finding an order to implement automation programs and projects in that is non-destructive and builds confidence in you and your own team's capabilities and your infrastructure's capabilities, and allows you to maximize what you get out of the infrastructure investments you made. And Fred did a series of super cool demos so far on a variety of topics. But Fred, why don't you plug the most recent one you did just before this and give us the final overview of what that one was?
Yeah, we actually did a neat demo where we plugged in Batfish with Ansible with Cloud Vision to be able to deploy things, but validate the config changes before we actually deployed it through Cloud Vision. So we used, Ansible to generate the configs, Batfish to validate those generated configs, and then Cloud Vision to actually be the change control process for those new changes.
Yeah, and if you think about that, it's eliminating human error, right? We spend tens of thousands of man hours optimizing on how to fix an 18-inch fiber cut and detect it and fail over quick, yet at least 10 times the number of outages are predicated on a fat-fingered config or I didn't mean to type that. And so another demo Fred just did shows us how to get ahead of that. And I just want to give a little replay of some of the topics we've covered. Take the time to explore it. If these were of interest to you, definitely feel free to reach out to Fred or I directly. We're totally accessible. And if there's something you'd really like to see that you think would be neat and valuable in your environment, we'd love to hear from you and chat about it. So with that, thank you again so much for your time and attention, and have a great time out there. And we really appreciate everything you guys are doing and all the feedback you're giving us on how to improve these to keep them useful for you.
Great, thanks everybody.